Hello, and welcome to Tim's Reflections from Ohio, a YouTube video series where we spend a little bit of time talking about and reflecting on parables that Jesus told, stories he told, and just general stories of his life. Today, our reflection will come from Matthew chapter 25, and I'll begin reading in verse 31 and read from there through the end of the chapter. And this is actually Jesus' words. It's in red in our Bible. And it says, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit down. Then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, 'Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me.' Then the righteous will answer him, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?' And the king will answer and say to them, 'Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me.' Then he will also say to those on the left hand, 'Depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in, naked, and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me.' Then they will answer him, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister to you?' Then he will answer them, saying, 'Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me.' And these will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." I've been thinking about these verses. I read something this week, and I wanted to share it with you. And what it is, it's a story in a book. And the book is called My Favorite Life-Changing Stories by a man named Joe L. Wheeler. And Joe Wheeler he has massive collections of stories, it sounds like. And he's put these stories into book form with different series of books. And this one is, as I said, My Favorite Life-Changing Stories. And this story is called The Stranger Within Thy Gates. The author is unknown, and so he doesn't know a whole lot of the history of the story. But here's the story. And this was when I read it this week, it struck me as a powerful story, and I thought, I want to share this on the next video because I think that we all can learn something from the experience of the man in this story. And it begins, "Did you notice that young man who occupied the corner in the back pew during the morning service?" inquired Mrs. Murray of her husband as they lingered at the tea table one bright Sunday evening. "Yes, I was just going to speak to him. He occupied the same place last Sunday morning and attracted my attention, particularly because he was such a good listener," the pastor replied quietly. "I meant to speak to him at the close of the service, but he was gone before I could reach him." "It is a pity, for he seems so alone," answered Mrs. Murray. "Do you know his name?" "I am sorry, I do not. I made inquiry about him last Sunday evening, but no one seemed to know where he was from or what he was doing in this town. If he comes again, I must not miss him." But he did, and in precisely the same way that he had done on 2 former occasions. The pastor intended to clasp his hand and give him a cheering word, but while he was busy here and there, the young stranger was gone, and that without exchanging words with a living soul. The pastor again lamented the neglect as he walked home by the side of his wife, and in his disappointment expressed the hope that some other one had taken the young man by the hand and had bidden him welcome, but no one had. I shall try to see him during the week and invite him to come to my class next Sunday, he said, trying to make amends with his conscience for the opportunity he had missed. Yes, I shall not let another week pass by without making his acquaintance, he added, but how little he knew of the opportunities which the coming week should deny. That very night, just as the clock struck 12, a horseman, riding furiously, halted at the parsonage gate, and in a frightened voice begged the minister to come without delay to the bedside of this same young man, George Fulton, who was dying. In a very few moments, Mr. Murray was speeding toward the lumber camp where he learned that the young man was employed. But never before did the familiar road seem so long, and never before, even in the darkness, did his trusty mare make so many false steps. When at last the house where George was lying was reached, it was only to learn that it was too late, that the opportunity of pointing a brother to Christ was gone forever. The people at the camp knew very little about the young stranger, except that he was quiet and well-behaved, and always took the heavier end of the timbers when there was lifting to be done. Indeed, he prided himself on his fine physique and great strength, and it was to this very natural pride that the physician laid the cause of his sudden death. On the Friday preceding, the men in the camp had been testing their strength by lifting heavy weights, and he complained a little of overstrain at the time, but until he awoke in the night with a hemorrhage that speedily terminated fatally, no serious consequences were apprehended by himself or others. His wish to have the minister called had been gratified, but half an hour before the messenger returned, poor George Fulton had died. From a little diary that the father of the dead boy put into his hand on the day of the funeral, Mr. Murray learned that it was his loneliness that had driven him to the house of God on the first day, and that something in his sermon that morning had set him to thinking seriously of the careless life he had been leading. Again and again he went without receiving either the comfort or the aid he sought, and then before the welcome words that had been lingering on the pastor's lips, the words he fully meant to speak, had been uttered, he was gone, his life work ended, and the opportunity of helping a struggling brother heavenward had passed forever. All this the young pastor felt, and that day, as he stood by the coffin of the stranger who had passed away without so much as a smile of recognition, he vowed to be more faithful in the future. A full decade has passed since that grave on the hillside was dug, and the vow then made has been faithfully kept. No stranger is allowed to visit Mr. Murray's church, even for a single service, without receiving a warm hand clasp and a kind word to cheer him on his way. The lesson learned by the coffin of that young lumberman has never been forgotten, and though it came too late to be of aid to him, it has helped others, wayfarers tarrying for perhaps but a day, to lay their burdens down at Jesus' feet, and in their stead to bear a joyful song away. Life is too short to miss a single opportunity of giving a cup of cold water in the Master's name. Hence, an imitation of him who came not to be ministered to, but to minister. Let us bid Godspeed to this stranger within our gates, not knowing but that we may thereby help a struggling brother into the light. And then it ends with one of the verses we already read. Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me. I read the story this week, The Stranger Within My Gates. And as I read that story, I thought about the opportunities I've had and missed. The reflection today is to think about opportunities that you have and I need to think about, and I will be thinking about opportunities that I have. Do we take those opportunities, or do we sit back and think, oh, I don't know what to say, they might get angry with me, and we're afraid to speak up for God, speak up for Jesus? Don't miss those opportunities. We never know what's going on in someone else's life. We never know what the battles are that they're facing. We never know the struggles that are going on in their lives. I read a story a while back about a young man who was sitting in church on Sunday morning, and he happened to notice off to the side on the same pew there was a woman that was dressed rather poorly. And she looked like she didn't have a lot of money. Her clothes weren't of the best kind. But she was there. And as the service ended, he was felt impressed to give her all the money in his wallet. And he said that as the service was winding down, coming to a close, he kind of scooted over to her and he said, I feel impressed by God to give you this. And he reached in his wallet and he handed her the money. And she said she started to cry. And she told him the story that she had woken up that morning and she felt impressed to come to church. But at the same time, she knew she only had enough gas in her car to get to church, not enough to get home afterward, and she had no money for gas. She didn't know how she was going to get to work until payday, which was the following Tuesday. She didn't know how she was going to get to work in that time period. But this money that this young man gave to her was enough to give her the gas she needed to get home and to get to work and home until payday came on Tuesday. The story went on to say that the young man he was planning to use that money for his lunch after church, but he gave it away in obedience to God. After he did that, a friend of his in church said, "Hey, why don't we go to lunch today and I'm buying?" And he said that the lunch his friend bought him was actually cost more than what he had in his pocket, or what he had given away that day. But it was it ended in being a blessing to everyone. He did not miss that opportunity to bless that young woman. God took care of his need for lunch that day. And God doesn't ask everyone, I've said this before, God doesn't ask us all to give away all the money in our wallet. But he does ask us to speak up a word for him. Because, as I said earlier, we don't always know what's going on in someone else's life. But if we can brighten their day, if we can, just say a few words to point them to Jesus, it can change the whole direction of their lives. It can change their mindset. It can get them thinking about spiritual things. And in closing, I just want to say, leave you with this to think about, that don't miss those opportunities. Don't miss those opportunities to speak to God, to people that you meet every day, your coworker, your neighbor, someone in the store, the cashier at the cash register, anybody that your path crosses with. Speak up for God. Speak up. We just never know what good can be done, and we want to be those people that Jesus talked about here when he said, in the passage that I read, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." Those are the words we want to hear at the end of this world, when judgment day comes. That's what we want to hear. "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." We don't want to miss that. If you've been blessed by the reflection, please hit the thumbs up button. Leave a comment. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. That way you'll receive notification as new videos come out in the future. Have a blessed day. Have a blessed week. And remember, as always, God loves you. And he loves you so much that he sent his son Jesus to be born on this earth, to live on this earth, and to die that horrible death. Thank you so much for viewing. Have a blessed day.